Good afternoon, guys. Steve here again. Today we are going to be looking at the Customer Supplier Returns through Prima. We've got probably quite a short session because the modules themselves are pretty small, and most of the data is coming from other areas of the system, so there's not really a kind of manual version of it. So we'll run through it as if we're doing a collection for the customer, and then on the back of that, the ability to the system for you to create a supplier return and what happens around those things. Okay, so I'll just switch onto my screen now, and then we can look at how it works in the system. Okay, so essentially the way Customer Returns works in Prima is you deliver some stuff through the system, goods to your customers. Once the dispatch note is set to delivered on that sales order line, then that thing, whatever it may be, can be returned back through the system, and a collection note can be raised for the customer. Yeah? Okay, so it's a pretty common thing for us to deal with. So the actual process, we've tried to essentially make it as quick as possible, but still giving you the options there to see what's available. So I'll get straight into it. I just wanted to show you on the dashboard, if you guys are using the dashboard to manage any of your returns, and you want to see what's still essentially needs to be processed, etc. You have got tiles for customer and supplier returns that you can add via the organize tiles option here. So once we've been through the session and you guys feel like you need to have these on your dashboard screen, you can just click on the relevant tile and choose to show it in your dashboard, just from a management purpose, if you like. Okay, so if I run through into the customer returns, collection notes, however you call them in Prima, it's customer returns. Okay, you would come into the customer returns screen, and this is where you would see your existing notes that have already been generated, like any of the Prima lookups. So you can search, and I can search whatever's in the system that exists already. So I've got 43 records in here. But what we're talking about today, we can have a look at some of these perhaps in a few minutes, but we're really talking about generating the customer returns in the first place. Okay, so over to the right hand side, like you've got in the movements area on the other sections, such as receipt and dispatch, you've got your available lines over on the right hand side, and that is basically, if I click into here, what I will see in here is anything that's been dispatched for a particular customer that's not, I guess, yet been returned. So if a return obviously already exists against it, then it won't show in the list. So it would be a case of you finding that customer or that sales order number, product code. You see you've got a few options at the top in terms of how you find that customer's order. So I'm just going to search by, I know I've got KPMG in here as a customer. I'm not breaking it down by sale or anything, and I'm just going to hit enter and return the results. So what I'm seeing here is a list of everything that's been dispatched to that customer, and I can narrow that down or sort, if you like, via the sales order number. So the customer quotes you the order number, they quote you the product code. You do also have access to the purchase order number if it's on a purchase order number, and the contract there, that would be the invoice number if you want to use the customer invoice number. So however they choose to give you that information, whatever information you can have. It's a case of you finding that product. So it's my KF24001, whatever it might be on here, and I would highlight it and create the notes. Okay. So you can pick multiple lines at that point, or you can just use one item, as I've done there. So if it's 5 lines on a particular order, you would need to search for that order number or sort on the sales order column, and then highlight all of those lines, because you'd have to return them. They come onto the return item as individual lines. So Prima creates an outstanding customer return, and then I would just double click to open that. And at this point, this is where I'm choosing what I want to happen with the goods. Okay. So if I've got a reference, so the customer might provide you with a reference that they want to give as part of the return. You might put what was wrong with the item. I've seen some customers use what was wrong with the item in terms of the reference. Some customers would use the invoice number, so when they're looking in the grid, they can see the invoice number against the customer return, and it's just a kind of quick reference. So you've got a few options there. It's a field essentially that you guys would type in that's relevant to you. Location at the bottom. So this is where's it going back to? Or where's it being collected from? So if you want to pick it up from one of the delivery locations essentially against that customer account, then you can assign that, and that's what will appear on the collection note. You've got reasons for return. So these are what we call user-defined fields. There's nothing in here by default, as you can see, but if you want to measure over a period of time how many faulty goods have we called back, how many times has the customer ordered the wrong item, not required, whatever it may be, you can just click on the add item option. And then click OK, and that will just add a value into there, and then that can be used again for the next time. The carrier in here, to be honest, I've not really seen anyone use it. What it was for, as kind of like a legacy thing, was you could mark a company record in the system as a carrier, and then when you go to collect the goods, you basically assign that carrier to the job, and it would appear on the collection note as that person's coming to pick up the goods. But I've not really seen it used. The notes, again, this would just be an internal reference. If you wanted to put some notes, again, I've seen customers put invoice numbers and purchase order numbers and other things that will help as a quick reference to find this item again. Okay. So once you've got those items in, you basically the way the return works is all kind of governed by these two boxes here, and what you tick determines what happens with that item or items. Okay, so essentially, as a kind of brief thing, you need to choose one from each one of these boxes, and you can only pick one from each one of these boxes. Okay, so I'll just explain what they're for. So return to stock would be when you complete the collection note, that would bring that item back into your stock, into I suppose a quarantine area. It's called, against the batch, it would be called goods returns. And if you want to use that stock again, then you transfer the batch to the goods inwards, and that would make it available to be used again. I think the reason previously that it was designed like that in the first place was so there may be something wrong with that good, so you don't want to mark it back straight into free stock if there's potentially something wrong with it. So it would just be a case of going into the batch once you've completed the return and marking it as available to use again if you wanted it to go back in. So, and not required, for example, might be the reason to send it back to the goods inwards. Returns to the supplier. This is probably the most popular one that's used by our customers. Essentially what happens there is when you complete the return, the collection note, the customer return, it generates an outstanding supplier return. Okay, and that would be your process. Then would go through to the supplier return, raise the return with the supplier, and we'll come on to that in a sec. Return to CRS system. Okay, so we've got some customers that use the FSM module in Prima, and when they're allocating parts through the CRS core logging system, it's basically a way to bring the item back as part of that, because there's no sales order, if you like, in the system for that particular item. It was allocated as part of a engineer call out, and it's just basically saying you're bringing that back. And then the bottom option here is gift to customer. So that would be the case if, for example, they ordered a packet of staples off you, and it was 20 miles away. They'd ordered the wrong ones, and you're going to replace them anyway. But you've said to the system you don't want to do anything in terms of stock movements. So gift to customer basically means keep it, and the system will be as it is in terms of the stock movement. So that's used quite commonly if you don't want to go out and physically pick that item up anymore. So then you've got the two options at the bottom. Okay, so credit customer generates a sales credit, an outstanding sales credit for the customer, and then send replacement to customer will, when you complete this return, it will drop the same item back onto your, for the same quantity, back onto your requirements screen, so you can source that again for the customer. So they're happy to accept the original invoice. You don't need to raise a credit, but you do need to get them a new version of it because it was broken, for example. Okay, so I'm going to tick these options. I'm going to tick return to supplier and credit customer. The available lines here would be, for example, we were talking about before, having an order of 5 lines on, and by mistake you've only put 4 onto the return. You can click onto the return and then search for anything else that you might want to add to this collection note as well, and then you can add it to the note should you need to. Okay, so I'm just going to save that. If the quantity was more than 1, so by default what will happen is when you go into your available lines and you create the note in the first place, the quantity that was delivered at the time will be the default quantity that comes onto the collection note. If you need to change that, so say for example they ordered 5 but you only want to collect 3 of them, you would double click into the line and edit the quantity that you want to collect. What will happen is when you complete the return, the remaining 2 would go back into the available lines area as stuff that's still with the customer as the system believes. Yeah. Okay. Once you've got the return as you need it, you can produce a copy. So if you're giving it to your delivery driver to collect, then you can go into the report area, or you can do it from the grid as you can with other reports in Prima, and you can raise a collection note. So obviously, if you're using the system, you would have seen, I'm sure, that the collection notes have got your branding, etc. on there, and you can kind of jazz them up to suit your business. Yeah. You could use the journals. I have seen customers use journals to say that the customer needs to let the customer know that they have to have the goods ready for it to be collected on a certain day. So they might put a journal on, for example, and then that would pop on the dashboard, so they know the next time that driver's going to be in that area, they need to call them and get the goods ready. So you could use a journal to kind of give you a reminder of something that needs to be done with that collection note. And essentially, when you're ready to go with it, you just complete. Okay, so we chose what's going to happen. One from each of those boxes, and I'm going to complete. Okay. If I just jump into here, back into the line just for a sec, in the links, I can go straight into the credit. I've got the sales order and I've got the sales invoice in here. Okay, you could go via the modules on the main Prima screen, but just to show you what options you've got essentially in the links area, you can see that. Okay, so if I just briefly show you in the invoicing and sales credits, based on that return that I've done, I will have an outstanding credit that was done today by myself for that value. And what we see generally happen is the guys would leave this potentially outstanding until you've received the credit from the return that you'll have raised with the supplier. Not always the case, but generally you want to make sure that you've had your money back first before you start issuing credits to the customer. Okay, so that's just to show you essentially that Prima generates that automatically. On the supplier return side, movement supplier returns, if I have a look for some outstanding ones, if the stuff's come to your system as part of a purchase order, then what will happen is it'll generate a return against that relevant supplier. If it's come from stock, then what you would see is it would need to be managed slightly different. But for the most part, what you guys will have is you'll have placed a purchase order, so that item that I used before has come from stock, so it's slightly different. But in here, it'll create a supplier return, and then it'll be based on the purchase order that was linked to the sales order. So this is your supplier return screen, if you like, and this is what you'll see. So at this point, just need to say that none of the suppliers offer an EDI returns process. I guess they don't want to make it too easy for you guys to send stuff back, but you still need that visibility in the system and traceability of what's happening in terms of the returns and what Prima needs to do about that. So the supplier return in Prima is you essentially getting the information that's come from the collection note and you appending that with your returns reference that you would get from, for example, VOW in this instance. So if they give you like a returns reference, what we generally see our customers do is put the returns reference in the field here. Okay, when you call them, because you'd still need to call them however you normally raise the return, if they ask you for the original kind of quos numbers, what you'll have, my EDI is not switched on here, but this purchase reference here, this field, will be your original quos number for the order of this item. Okay. So just as a reference point, so you know where it's getting that information from, you can just look in this purchase reference. Okay. So you don't need to do anything with the location, the carrier. You could put notes on there if you wanted to. I've seen customers use the notes field for marking whether they've called and placed actually physically called the return through. And some customers have copied through the quos number onto the notes as well. Again, just so they've got visibility of it in the lookup when they're looking at all the notes together. The default option here, again, like you've got with the customer return, what you need to do is, in this instance, always leave it as credit required from supplier, because they will always issue a credit, whatever the situation. So leave it as credit required, and then once you've called it through, you can complete it, and then Prima will be waiting for an outstanding credit to match to this return. Some of our customers would leave it outstanding until they've received the credit. Some of our customers would leave the customer return outstanding until they've phoned through and got the credit organised with the supplier. Obviously, doing it that way, you would need to remember to create the supplier return after the event, and put the detail through. So I guess there's no right or wrong answer in terms of how you want to manage it. All you need to know from Prima's point of view is there won't be a supplier return there in the first place unless you complete the collection note customer return. So from the supplier return side of things, there isn't really too much to it. I can just show you if there's any links associated with this item. You've got your original PO number in here. I believe you would see the purchase invoice in here as well. I don't think there is a purchase invoice against this line. So you've still got, like I say, coming back to that traceability element. So we advise all customers to handle the returns through Prima rather than doing it outside. And when you complete it, like I say, Prima will be waiting for a purchase credit to come in. So in the same way as it handles normal credits, the purchase credits that come in will always remain outstanding. And when Prima matches to it, it will still stay outstanding, because you obviously need to check that you're being credited the right amount before you pass it through. So the process is pretty straightforward in terms of the system going from customer to supplier return. It's just I guess it's for you guys, it's just a case of timing and deciding when you want to issue the credit. It will determine when you want to complete the record and complete the supplier return as well. Okay, so if I just run back through briefly, just from a customer return element, I just wanted to show you taking the stuff and putting it into stock, for example. So if I go into the available lines, I'll find KPMG again because they had quite a lot of stuff. Take this code, for example. Create the note. Open the note. Put my reference in. It's not required. I'm going to return it to stock, and I'm going to credit the customer. Okay, so I've saved that, and I can complete this. So just showing you again, going into the line. If I needed to split the quantity, I could change that there. Via my links, I can see the credit that I've now generated. I can see the original order. If it's been purchased, I can see the purchase order number in here as well. So I'm just gonna link through to the actual product record via the details button here, and just show you where where you would see that stock that you've brought back in. So you go into stock, the stock record, and your balances. And if I go into batch records, the batch that I've generated will be this one here. And it's general stock, goods returns. This was the one that was sold. It's general stock, goods returns. And essentially what I need to do is I need to switch that to goods inwards and save it. And then I can use that stock as free stock on the order. So I've taken the goods essentially back into my system, and I've checked them over. They're okay to be sold again. So I'll just put them on the shelf, and then you're just basically saying to the system, I can use those again, whilst at the same time issuing the credit for the customer. Okay. So as we see it, the returns process, in terms of number of clicks and getting from one stage to the next, is pretty short in terms of the time that's taken to do that. And like I say, it's just from experience, it's a question of timing as to when you want to complete the certain record to pass it on to the next stage. Okay, so that's what we've covered today through the returns module, or movements module if you like. We'll stick around again for some questions, and what we're going to do is we're going to be putting the Twitter poll on this afternoon for the next couple of days, and we're going to obviously give you guys the opportunity to vote on the next topics that we're looking to cover, based on the feedback that we've had already. It's really good to see via the Twitter poll that people getting involved and basically choosing the content that we put on these sessions. So like I say, I'll stick around for a few minutes, and then if you've got any questions, please fire them away, and we'll pick it up on the chat. Okay, thanks for your time today. Cheers, see you next week.